Hello, and welcome to the Over 50 Health and Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin English, founder of The Silver Edge. Our mission at The Silver Edge is to inspire men and women in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond to live their strongest, healthiest, most fulfilling lives. In this podcast, we share stories of amazing individuals who are doing just that, to help motivate you to become the healthiest version of yourself, regardless of your age. And now, on to today's podcast. Hello, my guest today is John Sutcliffe. John is a 61-year-old lifelong fitness enthusiast. He graduated from the State University of New York with a degree in sports management and has been in the health and fitness industry his entire career. John has completed 2 Ironman triathlons and looks forward to getting back into racing again. John, welcome to the show.
Morning, Kevin. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks. Certainly want to talk to you about the Ironman. I know you have a good story there, but let's back up and start at the beginning. Tell us what you were like as a kid.
Yeah, so I grew up. I was actually born in Lancaster, PA. Moved around quite a bit, including my dad joined the Peace Corps when I was young, and we went over to Africa for 4 years, where he taught English as a second language. And that was when I was from 8 to 12 years old. And even then, even though I wasn't involved in team sports, I was still really active, always out doing stuff. When we moved back from Africa, we did settle in New Jersey, and that's really where I started doing team sports. So I decided in 8th grade that I was going to try out for the soccer team. Had done a little bit of that casually in Africa, but nothing serious. And ended up making that team in 8th grade. And, I ended up actually being a starter. And that kind of really is where the passion for sport kind of began for me. And then when I got to high school, I kind of did everything. So I continued with soccer, where and that was really my passion, actually, with soccer. I made the freshman team, I made the sophomore team, I ended up making varsity my junior and senior years. My senior year, I won the Charlie Hustle Cup Award, where he who hustles the most wins. And I was the first person at Morristown High School to play every single second of every game. Never left the game my senior year. I also took up wrestling. Wasn't as passionate about that, but boy, I learned a lot about discipline. And even though it's kind of individual, it's still a team sport. And then I ended up doing lacrosse, and in the summer I'd do baseball. So that was kind of my cup of tea. I wasn't as much academic as I was on the sports side of it. My dad was obviously an English professor. My uncle was a phys ed teacher in Philadelphia. And that kind of inspired me to want to be a phys ed teacher. And so when I graduated from Morristown, I went up to the State University of New York at Cortland, which had it had the second ranked national phys ed program in the country, with the intent of really going on to teaching school. And to make a long story short, I didn't student teach, but I got involved in a school that I was there long enough that I realized I really didn't want to teach because no one wanted to be in phys ed. I didn't know that. I wasn't one of those people, Kevin.
Right. No, I get it. Yeah.
I now realize why they didn't want to be there. These people were playing dodgeball with people that were heaving balls at them that were, they weren't athletic, and it was pretty damn intimidating. But that's what I realized. And so I decided to switch my emphasis to coaching. So I got several coaching certifications. But I also then, my junior year, decided to switch over to sports management, which then involved me, taking all the business related courses. After graduating from Cortland, I went on into the health club industry, where I started from bottom. I started out working the front desk at night and when the club closed, I'd close the club down and go clean it. So, I learned everything there was to learn because I started from the bottom and just worked my way up. That was with a company called Bob Boone. I don't know if you remember him. He was a catcher for the Philadelphia Phillies. He had several clubs, and I went on to become involved in management there before I left and moved on to other clubs. So I've really always kind of, I've wanted to help people lead healthier lifestyles. That's really my goal, and obviously part of that was wanting to be a phys ed teacher. But being involved in the health club industry, health and fitness industry, allowed me to really do that. So
pardon my interruption, but what year was it that when you started that health club? That I guess that would have been right as you were graduating or while you were still in school?
Yeah, so I was due to graduate. I graduated high school in 1977, so I should have graduated college in 81. But unfortunately, and this was one of my changes in life for me, I ended up going to Cortland, and I ended up, I didn't even try out for the team. I was 2 days late to get on the soccer team. And I honestly was like, yeah, I'm not going to make this team. And I went on to score a bunch of goals and ended up being a starter on the freshman soccer team at Cortland, which was a pretty big deal because they actually, when I was there, the 4 years they were there, they were in the national Division III finals every single year. But in between my freshman and sophomore year, I worked at an ice cream store that was 5 or 10 miles from home, and I bought a motorcycle to get back and forth. And on the last day of work, I got cut off, and I ended up shattering my tibia and fibia in 5 spots. Compound fracture, really almost lost my leg, but my dad didn't tell me that at the time. But that kind of put an end of my fear of going back out in the soccer field because it was the tibia and fibia. I just couldn't overcome that. And so I stopped playing soccer after my freshman year in college. I did wrestle that year. My sophomore year when I went back, so I had to take off the first semester. But even in wrestling, I wasn't all that enthralled with. So I ended up more moving into running and stuff like that. And then I graduated from Cortland in 82. And in order to graduate with that sports management degree, you had to do an internship. And I did my internship at Bob Boone's, and that's how I ended up there.
And what kind of a club was that then in 82? What did a typical
vastly different?
Like? I would imagine, yeah.
So you're probably old enough to remember Nautilus.
Yep.
It was, and you probably remember racquetball. So racquetball, 10 courts of racquetball.
Yep.
And then up on the second floor, we had 2 lines of Nautilus. So that's where it all began. And both of those are nearly gone. Yeah. Nautilus didn't adapt with the times and is a struggling manufacturer in our industry even now. And racquetball, same thing. It virtually disappeared. And the reason really for that is because as club operators, we're always looking at dollars per square foot that we can generate. And the reality is with any sport, whether it's racquetball, tennis, golf, when you got a lot of square feet and not many people on it, it's a difficult business model. And so the club operators started to realize that back then, which was in the early 80s, and started to do things like, okay, I'm going to take that racquetball court and make it a weight room, or I'm going to make it an aerobics room. Back then it was called aerobics, not group exercise back then. And, instead of having 2 people playing racquetball, you got 20 ladies doing, some sort of group exercise class. And then they said, well, wait a minute, I can double deck this now. And so I can get 2 floors of this. And that kind of began the erosion of racquetball. And then the sport itself was kind of disappearing. And needless to say, most clubs, it's rare to see a racquetball court anywhere anymore. And then Nautilus. So Arthur Jones, the original founder of Nautilus, we really should thank him for kind of the beginning of the health club business. They were actually called Nautilus clubs back then. I didn't work at a Nautilus club, but we had Nautilus equipment. And his concept was that when you weightlifted, you did one set, you did it to maximum, and then you moved on to another muscle group. And that's how his routines were set up. When you lifted, you did sets of 12 to 15. You did, when you were lifting the weight, it was to a 2 count. And when you were low in the weight, it was to a 4 count. That's where the negative resistance really starts building or breaking down the muscle. And then he used a cam, so the Nautilus shell, obviously, which varied the resistance so that at the ends of the muscle, it was actually slightly lighter than in the middle. And so it really helped give you strength all the way through the muscle instead of kind of just creating bulk in the middle and not doing much with the ends. And so that's where it all began. And, he went on to develop a great company, but they refused to change. They were driven by chains, and people just didn't, the maintenance was a nightmare. So these cables came along and the footprints were gigantic. And when you go back to that square footage thing, you want to get as many pieces of equipment in that room as you can. And so a lot of other companies came along with the cable-driven lines, which is what dominates the industry nowadays. But I still often lift that way. I still promote that that's a great way to lift.
What's the 2 count? The 2 count on the
2 count, 4 count, and doing one set to maximum is not a bad thing.
Yeah,
it's not done very often nowadays. People do multiple sets, and I'm not in disagreement with that either. But it's not a bad thing. Once in a while I say, listen, I'm gonna do 12 of these, and I'm at that 12th one, I'm done. I can't lift it anymore.
Yeah, doing 12 because you can't do 13, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's fascinating because I am aware that racquetball used to be a thing when I was a kid. That's, when my dad would take us out to a club, that's typically what we would do. There was volleyball space in some of these clubs, and I hadn't thought about the economic realities of the paying member per square foot playing into that, but that makes perfect sense. These club owners are obviously passionate, or we would hope they're passionate about health and fitness, but they need to make a living, and there are certain economic realities. So going back to your story, then in 82, you started at the ground floor. Like you said, you started one of these clubs, you had the racquetball, I think you said 10 racquetball rooms, but that's a lot, and a Nautilus line upstairs. And that does sound like a 1980s club. So you started there at the bottom. Where did you move from there?
So I went on to several different clubs. Well, at the time, I actually moved to California with my buddy Fred, thinking that I was going to get back in the health club industry in San Diego. And I ended up diverting. I couldn't find a club that I wanted to work at. And we can talk about that a little bit more later. But so believe it or not, I went into the car industry. I started selling cars, and I sold Nissans for a while. I sold Porsches for a while. I sold Acuras when they were absolutely just running them off the lot. I mean, it was crazy how popular they were. So I stepped out of the industry when I was in San Diego, and I was there for, I'm guessing, 3 or 4 years. And then I moved back to Philly, and a buddy of mine that had worked underneath me at Bob Boone's place was running a club called the 12th Street Gym, which was in downtown Philly. And so he brought me on, and he brought me on as the fitness director. But the goal was, and Mike was pretty clear, like, because I had come from management at that point, he said, we want to open up a second location, and I want you to get in now. And when we open up the second location, you'll move to the manager of that club. And so that ended up happening. We opened up a gym called 4th Street Gym. Same idea, 10 racquetball courts, but we had changed all those to more aerobics rooms, more weight rooms already. And so from there, myself and Mike and another buddy of mine decided we wanted to consult. And so we had this group that was in the outskirts of Philly that wanted to convert an old roller rink. And they wanted us to come on as consultants. And so when we went to our owners at 12th and 4th Street, they said, no, you can't work for us if you're going to consult for someone else. Well, yeah, we didn't like that. We left. And we started up a gym up in Upper Darby. That was we literally designed it. It was an old roller. It was the Chevu roller skating rink with the original wood floors. I mean, it was a spectacular space. And we carved out a big aerobics room, and we had this. And we kept the outside perimeter as a track just because it was nostalgic with that wood floor. We got our Nautilus equipment. I think it was Nautilus. I actually can't remember what we put in there. And so that ended up me going to work for them eventually. And then I stepped out of the club side of it to go into the equipment sales side of it. So I started with Nordic Track. Remember the cross?
Oh yeah, yeah, sure.
At the time, they were just mail order, and people couldn't try them. So they felt as though they were stagnating their sales, and they needed to get people on them. And so they started these kiosks in malls. And I took over a kiosk, or opened a kiosk in Wilmington, Delaware. It was, malls are rated A, B, and C malls. It was actually rated a C mall. Well, we proceeded to stomp the country in sales of these Nordic Tracks. I mean, we were doing well over $100,000 a month in sales out of a 10 by 10 kiosk in a mall.
Yeah.
It was insane. But the key was you had to teach people how to use that thing quickly. And if you could do that, done. It was a sale. And so I did that for a while. I went on to become their commercial sales. So then they built a unit for health clubs. And I moved on to becoming one of their, I might have been the first, I'm not sure. I was definitely the first on the East Coast. So I started trying to sell their commercial unit in health clubs. And then I left that to go back into the health club industry with a club in Upper Darby. Gosh, I can't remember the town. Springville Athletic Club, country club that wanted to open up an athletic club. So it was literally a hole in the ground when I got hired, and we designed and built about a 20,000 square foot facility. Didn't really get along with the owners great, so only lasted about a year there. And then I went back into the health club. The equipment sales with a company called Busybody. I was the commercial sales for New Jersey. So I represented lines like Precor and Cybex, a number of different lines, and did that for quite a while. And then my wife took a position in California. So in 2008, we moved back out to Westlake Village, or Thousand Oaks, California. And I took over as the Southwest regional manager for a company called Paramount Fitness, which manufactured weight equipment. And it just started doing cardiovascular equipment. And they really wanted to bring someone on board that had experience selling treadmills and that sort of stuff. And I had a lot of experience that with Busybody and Leisure Fitness. So I covered there. I was lucky. I had 5 states: California, Arizona, Nevada, New Mexico, and Hawaii. What a terrible place to travel.
Yeah, right.
So I got to go to places like San Francisco and Maui, and it was really it was a great job that I enjoyed, and I was pretty successful with it. But at the time, my son was starting to get close to high school. He was involved in sports, and as long as I traveled when he was younger, most of the sports were happening on the weekend, so I didn't miss anything. But then when he got to high school, I would literally leave, on Tuesday on a 6 a.m. flight, return late Thursday night, 30 weeks a year with Paramount. I started missing his events. And I can still remember, I thought back to my dad. I'm not sure my dad missed a single sporting event.
Yeah.
He was one of those that you could hear screaming and yelling up in the stands. And I'm like, he's going to play 60 lacrosse games in 4 years and I'm going to miss half of them. So I was thinking about making a move, and I was at a conference trying to sell Paramount, and one of the club operators that I was talking to about equipment said, John, we just bought this club in Westlake Village. I'm like, that's 9 miles from me. You guys need something to run that?
Mm-hmm.
And so after, I don't know, 3 or 4 months, it was a tough job to get, actually. I got hired to run a place called it was called Westlake Tennis and Swim at the time. And we renamed it Westlake Athletic Club, and we went in there and totally changed. Same thing. You got the problem with the square footage, the dollar per square footage thing. And so so we ended up bringing fitness in. We created a small fitness area. We brought in a group exercise room. We expanded the amount of people using the pool. So it was really a total renovation. I was there for 9 years, and as I looked back, the amount of changes we made were incredible, including just like an awesome outdoor fitness area. You're in Southern California, you can pull that off. But it was kind of eye-opening for me because I always trained outside, right? I'm a triathlete. I ride outside. I usually swim outside. I run outside. Well, why wouldn't you want to weightlift outside, right? If you could do it. And it turned out to be and obviously in these times, it turned out to be a really smart maneuver because they're one of the few places open right now in California because they have outdoor workout areas. They have tennis.
So let me interject real quick for anybody listening to this in the future. We're recording this in August of 2020. So obviously we're in the midst of the COVID-19. So when John's talking about they're one of the only places open, that would be obviously in an outdoor space. And we've got a lot of states still have gyms closed. So you've obviously seen a lot of change in the industry. And as you were telling the stories early on, when you were doing the Nordic track in the mall, I think that you guys were pioneering a pretty successful model back then. I'm not sure who else was doing that at the time, but I think now it's been a while since I've been in a mall, but the last time I was in one, I think there's a Peloton, just what you explained, right? That little 10 by 10 cubicle, and they're doing the same kind of thing, right? They're teaching people how to use it, how to, in their case, how to, join these virtual communities. And that's a big part of it. But seems like you guys were setting precedents back then for models that are still being used today. And certainly you go into any big, like a Globo Gym type environment, we see exactly the footprint that you're describing, right? How are we going to maximize this? There's probably a one or more group exercise rooms. And that it kind of explains why when you walk into that place, those machines are packed in there. And I guess that makes sense that these people are trying to maximize their square footage.
Yeah, so I would say in some senses that's become a detriment because they've gone so far to that.
Yeah.
That the truth is they're really just taking in dues and not necessarily working hard enough to get people healthy. So I was lucky enough to operate clubs that were smaller. We weren't driven upon maximum number of people. We were really driven on creating high levels of service at higher dollar amounts. And we really cared about our members, and we wanted them to really lead healthy lifestyles. And so our industry isn't exactly that way right now, which is a little bit disappointing to me. But it doesn't mean that there's not a lot of tremendous people out there that are doing phenomenal things because it's still a tremendous industry.
Yeah, your point's well taken there. Certainly, there are great smaller gyms, there are probably great larger gyms as well.
Yeah,
but for folks that don't understand the economics of some of these, what we're terming a globo type gym, really the way they make their money is by having very low membership fees and getting a lot of members, most of them probably in January 1st, when you get your New Year's resolutioners in, et cetera. But they count on the fact that people will join and then not show up. Because clearly if all those people showed up at once, the gym would not be able to handle that. And so that is disappointing, because it's disingenuous. It's a bit of a money-making, I don't want to call it a scam, but it's certainly not, to your point, having your client's best interest, health and wellness interest at heart. Is that fair?
Yes, and you'll notice I chose not to say exactly what you said.
I did notice that you seem to be tiptoeing around there, so that's why I wanted to bring it out in the open. Let's talk about it.
Because I want to be careful. I don't want to discourage people.
Right.
And even if 20% of those people show up, it's still 20% people are active. So it's a good thing in that sense. But it also leaves the door open for a different model. And that's the model that I just chose to be in. And so we actually at Westlake Athletic Club, we used a company called Medallia, which is a survey company. If you've ever stayed at like a Hilton or a Marriott and you filled out a survey, Medallia is the company that is surveying you. Well, they do that in the health and fitness industry as well. They have 569 clubs across the country, where basically what we do is we send 3 emails out every single day to our members that have been there in the last 30 days, and we ask them to evaluate us on a whole bunch of different stuff. Some of it's numerical on a score of 0 to 10. Some of it's commenting, so you're learning about your staffing and that sort of stuff. And I am really, really proud to say that Westlake Athletic Club was consistently in the top 5 in the country. We had a member satisfaction level of 9.2 while I was there. We had a staff friendliness score of 9.6. 9.6. I mean, I was so blessed to have such an amazing staff, and we cared about our people, and that comes through, right? That's how you get that 9.2. And we weren't the biggest and fanciest, but we were interested in you. So that was a big thing for me.
Well, all of that's very fascinating, kind of how we've gotten to where we are and the history of that industry. But let's shift gears a little bit, and let's talk about, you had briefly mentioned that you like exercising outdoors, and at the top of the show we mentioned that you've done a couple of Ironmans. Let's start. Tell us how you got into Ironman, and let's kind of talk through that story.
Okay, so when I was so remember I stopped doing team sports, so I was trying to fill that gap, and it started with running when I was still back on the East Coast. But when I moved out to California with Fred, I started being associated with people that were doing triathlons, and I kind of became interested in that. And in particular, I had a buddy that did Ironman Hawaii, Kona. Back when there probably was 100 participants. I mean, it was virtually non-existent back then. So I started doing small triathlons back then. And
when you say back then, what year was that roughly, or what decade?
That would have been the late 80s.
Late 80s, okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mid 80s, maybe. Triathlons were just unheard of kind of back then. So we were doing what they call shorter distance sprint ones, which are ones that can take you 45 minutes to an hour. Most of the ones I started doing were what they qualified as the international distance, which is it's just under a mile swim. It's a 40K bike ride and a 10K run, and really fast people are doing it under 2 hours. I do them somewhere between 2.5 to 2:45, 3 hours, somewhere in there. But I always kept thinking about Scott that did that Ironman. I thought, I would really want to do that, but it wasn't really coming together. I when I moved back east, I continued to do the triathlons. I decided to do a half Ironman in Tupper Lake, New York, which was kind of my first rather long one. and did fairly well at that. But I couldn't fit the component of the Ironman in my life. Got married, my son, I'm busy. And then I had a moment in California that really rocked me. I ended up, I went to the doctor one day and for a sore throat. And this is back when I was training pretty hard for international distances. And he stops me and says, John, you have to stop training. So you go see a cardiologist. And I'm like, really? Seriously? You know what I do, right? He's like, yeah, I'm serious. Your heart rate is so irregular that you have to stop and go see a cardiologist. And it just floored me. It just absolutely floored me. And it ended up being, even harder on me in the sense. So the way they correct that is a procedure called ablation, where they, if they can't get it back regular by, the chest thumping. So I decided to have an ablation done to bring it back to correct. And when you go for an ablation, what they'll do is they'll check to see if you have a blood clot in your heart. And lo and behold, now I've gone from not being able to train to being told I have a blood clot in my heart, which again was really devastating for me. And so then what they do is they put you on blood thinners and you try to clear the clot so you can try another ablation, which is exactly what we did. And I can still remember going back to the office to the doctor, and he's John, I don't have good news. The clot has not only not gotten any smaller, it's the same size. We're afraid it's a tumor. I can still remember looking at him saying, so I'm actually rooting for a blood clot versus a tumor. And it just, whew. Finally, the third one, it ended up not being a tumor. We got clear of the blood clot. We got the third one done. My heart rate got corrected. And virtually immediately, I was like, that's it. I wanted to do an Ironman. I don't know what's going to happen to me tomorrow, the next day, 5 years, 10 years down the road. So I said, went to my wife and said, I'm going to do an Ironman.
And how old were you then?
I was 55 then. Well, no, I'm sorry. I would have been 56 then. I had been training with people doing the shorter ones, so I knew people that were doing the long ones, and I jumped in with them. But I can remember Diane, my wife. She's like, you just had a heart problem. I said, as soon as the doctor clears me, I'm going to do this. And I was training he had cleared me to train. I was training with that group, and they were talking about this other big race that was done it used to be Ironman Europe. It was done in Roth, Germany, and it's now called Challenge Roth. It's still an Ironman. So I signed up for Ironman Canada. I told Diane within a week after the clearance from the cardiologist, I was signed up for Canada. And then a week later, I signed up for. So that was going to be Ironman Canada was going to be 2016. Roth Challenge was going to be 2017. And I went to Diane. I said, I know this is going to sound crazy, but I'm signing up for a second one. She looked at me and said, you haven't even done one.
Yeah.
I said, no, you're right. I haven't done one, but I'll tell you what, I will finish it short of something medically happening to me. And she just couldn't believe that I did it. On that first one, I only had about 5 months to get ready for that one. I was a little leery that wasn't enough time. But I had some friends that I relied on their opinions that felt as though I could do it. So 21 of us went up to Whistler, Canada in 2016. 20 of us finished that race.
Whistler, Canada sounds hilly to me. Am I wrong?
6,900 square feet of climbing on the butt.
Yeah. So why don't you remind folks that might not know not everybody listening is going to know what distances are involved in an Ironman. Why don't you, before we talk about how much climbing you had to do there?
Yeah, they're just going to think I'm nuts now, right? So it's a 2.4 mile swim. It's 112 miles on the bike. And then you just wrap that bad boy up with a marathon of 26.2.
Exactly. And as horrible as that might sound to some of you, doing that on a flat surface is going to be incredibly tough and challenging. But if you think about Whistler, Canada, that's not a flat place, is it?
No, we had two pretty substantial climbs. One was a shorter one, but it was up to where the ski jumps were. So for the Olympics, and so you can imagine those were up pretty high on the mountain. And so that was one. And then the second one, when you dropped out of Whistler, you dropped into some flatlands. I want to say that was 7, 8, 10 miles. I don't even know, but it was a pretty long climb back up from there. And so honestly, my mindset was 17 hours. So the way an Ironman is set up is you have till midnight to get in. And if you get in, you're an Ironman. And if you don't make it, you just spend a lot of time.
Yeah.
And because of the illness, I wasn't really ready to say I'm going to do anything other than finish. I thought that I would, but I wasn't willing to put a number out there. And I proceeded to finish in 14 hours.
Nice.
I think it was 14 and a half, somewhere in that range. And it was really, if you can envision, you're out. There are a couple of things that happened in that were really interesting. So I'm out after all that hill biking. You're out on a reasonably flat run, thank goodness. And I'm about 8 miles into the run, and I'm feeling pretty good. I'm pretty confident I'm going to make it. And what they do in triathlons is they write your number on your age on your calf. And so if you run by me, I can see, oh, Kevin's 52. And so at some point, a 75-year-old guy runs by me.
Wow.
And Kevin, I'm talking like he made me look like I wasn't really running. And your first thought is, this upsets me. And your second, or at least mine was really quickly, oh my God, I hope I can do that when I'm 75 years old.
Yeah,
I was so impressed. I never saw him again. I'm guessing he probably beat me by 20 or 30 minutes. But wow, it was really an unbelievable moment. And then what happens with Whistlers, your finish line is actually you circle around it and then come into the chute to the finish. And as you're running into the finish, you're probably a mile or two out, and you can start hearing them announce, Kevin, you are an Ironman. And you just get these goosebumps because you now know you're close enough, you're going to finish.
Yeah.
And you get all those people that you hear before you, and then you get in the chute and your name gets announced. And it's really the sense of accomplishment is really, really unbelievable. I know it's not for everyone, but dream big. Their motto is, anything's possible.
Yeah.
And there's some people that were definitely not in as great shape I was at, went out there and finished. But I also had another experience there that changed me as well. A couple of my friends had done Ironmans already, and they told me, listen, if you can, go back and watch that last hour. So I got back in 14 hours, and I'm almost ashamed to admit this, but on the way back to the condominium, we stopped at McDonald's so I could get some food.
Got to refuel, man. Yeah.
And within like 45 minutes, my energy level starts picking up from the food. And I said to Ryan and Diane, let's go back and watch these. Now, it's 11 to 12 p.m., right? Kevin, these people are cancer survivors. They're Parkinson's. They're barely walking. And, I am just so I'm blown away that these people are able to do this. And it just inspired me. But it also changed me because I was watching them thinking, okay, so I got in 14 hours. It was a hard day, but their day is a lot harder than mine was.
Yeah, a lot longer.
And then the real realization was, well, wait a minute. Whatever they're suffering from, every single day is a challenge to them. And I really realized, boy, we should be really thankful for our health. Really, really thankful for our health. And we should be inspired by people like them that don't have great health and went out and did stuff like that. So it really kind of changed my perspective to just be grateful really be grateful because, I just gone through the hard thing. I didn't know what was going to happen. And I see all these people, and it was inspiring. It was really inspiring to me. So then I put the running shoes and the biking shoes and the swimsuit back on, and I started getting ready for Germany. It was almost exactly a year later. It was in July, both Canada and 17 of us went over to Germany, and we all finished. I managed to get my time down because I now had a base block of training that I was able to get in. I got down to about 12 and a half hours. Which was just unbelievable to come to over 2 hours off of my time was.
Yeah.
I also didn't, then I obviously wanted to do better than 14, but I didn't even put a number on that. And it was partially because of what happened in Canada. I really wanted to appreciate being able to do these. Mm-hmm. It was more about the journey with the people and finishing in whatever time I could finish it. And that was my approach, rather than saying, okay, I'm doing 11 and a half hours. And for me, it worked. I did well. I enjoyed the day, which I know there are a lot of people are going to say, well, how do you enjoy that day?
Yeah.
You really can if you can look around and say, wow, I'm lucky to be able to be here. And it was a beautiful place and an amazing. If anyone's listening that wants to do an Ironman, that's really spectacular. Challenge Roth is unbelievable. It's 5,500 participants, sells out in 45 seconds.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that, because both marathons and triathlons seem to be growing in popularity. And I think you kind of hit on the reason why in your description of your experience. I think that once upon a time, that was a pretty elite athletic accomplishment. And it was people who took themselves very seriously and were looking for probably a time or, maybe placing in their age group or something. But now it's more and more, it's a bucket list. It's a something to do, as a culmination of a healthy lifestyle. And it seems to me almost that that's kind of what you're describing, especially as you say, you go back and watch that last hour of those people. Clearly they're not, probably most of those people were not there to win. They were not there to place, but they were there for another reason. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So also one other thing on Canada, went back to that last hour. One of my teammates that was up there, part of that 21 people, Julie, she came in at 11:50.
Wow. I'm just under the gun then, right? Just made it. She's an Iron Woman for life though. Yeah.
It was her birthday that day. Her husband or someone put a birthday thing on her head, and she came down the running chute. I started crying. I was just so blown away.
Wow. Yeah.
So I think what I'd rather I would like people to really think of triathlons as a means of living a healthy lifestyle and not be scared about, well, I got to do an Ironman. Well, they're not for everyone. Not everyone's going to do those, but there's a lot of shorter distance stuff that anyone can do in terms of time, in terms of effort. And it's a really great way to stay healthy because you're involved in 3 disciplines. Unlike like a marathon runner, it's pretty brutal on your knees. If you're doing triathlons, you're swimming, you're biking, you're running, it's less abusive on your joints. And so it's a great way to stay fit that's really less jarring on the body. So I would encourage people, just give it a try. There's shorter distances that, it's a 400-yard swim. It might be an 8 or 10 or 12 mile bike ride and who knows, a 2-mile run or whatever it could be. So there's definitely shorter stuff that can lead you. So remember, my first one was a short one. It was a sprint distance that eventually led me to doing an Ironman, but it doesn't mean you have to go to doing an Ironman. I think what you'll find though is just like anything, and this kind of rung through with I've watched several or listened to several of your podcasts. It's a community that wants to help each other.
Yeah.
And they will help you. I promise you, beginners are welcome into that industry. You come to me, I'll share anything I know with getting you started. And just like your CrossFit community, there are communities that just welcome people into them, and it's so much easier to train. It's, you're with groups of people with you like, and I've been really blessed. That group of people in California was just a phenomenal group of people I got to train with. I'm still in communication with them. I still race in their, it's called Conejo Valley Racing. I still race in their jersey, even though I'm in North Carolina now. So that sense of community is really important, because I think it'll help you stay motivated. It'll help guide you, and people, everyone wants you to succeed. And my job isn't to go out and beat Kevin on the course. If we're friends, maybe at best I want to go across the finish line with you, and share the moment with you. So yeah, don't be scared that all you can do is an Ironman. But if you choose to want to do an Ironman, it's possible for anyone.
And I've found a lot of what you say to be very, it resonates with me. I've done a bunch of not Ironmans, excuse me, a bunch of sprint and triathlons. And I certainly found that even early on, I did my first one literally with a, I don't know, $25 10 speed that I got at a garage sale, and it weighed like 50 pounds. It was ridiculous. But the community was great. It was fantastic to get started. There's a pretty low barrier of entry, right? I mean, you have to be able to run a little bit, swim a little bit, and bike a little bit. But when you go to these things, you see people, I've seen people do them on earth cruisers. So you don't have to be a fabulous athlete to get started. So if somebody's listening to this and maybe they're not a lifelong fitness enthusiast, right? Maybe they're a little bit out of shape and they listen to this and they think, well, gosh, I'm an Ironman. That's just completely out of striking distance. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But what would you say to that person to encourage them to get started maybe with some outdoor activities that might lead to a first a sprint triathlon?
Yeah. So, thinking about my background, I started as a runner, right? It was team sports that eventually put me in running, and I did a lot of running stuff in between the doing the running and eventually getting into triathlon. So pick somewhere and start it. It doesn't have to be running. Maybe it is biking. Maybe you want to start swimming. My advice to people, and this is the health club operator side of me, is that find something that you enjoy and get out and start somewhere.
Yeah.
Start somewhere. Most importantly, it's never too late to start. So what was I, 57 and 58 when I did those two races?
Mm-hmm.
There's people in the 80s doing Ironmans in Hawaii.
Right.
It's mind-boggling. There's this one gentleman, his son, I'm trying to think what the illness was, but he's been pulling his son in a kayak in the swim.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, I mean, you can't watch that and be like, "Oh my God, anyone!" And next day you think you're having a hard day, you think about that guy.
Right.
So just start somewhere is my message, and start slow. This is a long-term commitment to health. You don't need to start out gangbusters, because you're probably going to hurt yourself should you do that. And probably start thinking about. So for me, what helps me is joining those races or signing up for them is a motivator for me. So at some point along there, you start getting a little bit of fitness in you, and also touch base with the community. Whatever community it is, they will help you. If it's CrossFit, as you well know, if it's find out who the local community is that does triathlons and start talking to those people. And I promise you, they'll help you steer you in the right direction. At some point, then you do pick out that sprint one that you and I both, our first one, right? We had to pick one.
Mm-hmm. Put it on the calendar. Yeah.
Put it on the calendar and start doing a little bit of work to get there. And hopefully that leads you into doing, other ones. And whether you if you just do sprints the rest of your life, that's all right.
Sure.
If it's helping you be healthy, then so be it. That's good if that's what you enjoy.
Yeah, so that's solid advice. You got to start somewhere. Certainly, picking something that you enjoy and that will be sustainable is key. And the fact that it's never too late to start. Certainly, we have examples of that all around us. I think that your story is so inspiring. You've been healthy all your life, and you've been in the industry all your life, but it wasn't until you were, well into your 50s that you got to tick off that bucket list, right? Something that you
Yeah.
had wanted to do, and you're still looking forward to it. I take it. So let's shift a little bit. What's next for you? What's on deck?
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't think it'll be another Ironman. I think I'm done, but I also have a never say never motto. But I'll be honest with you, and it wasn't race. Everyone thinks it's the race day. That's the easy part. There's people screaming and hollering and rooting you on, and that 14 whatever hours, it goes by you so quickly. You're amazed that you're done. But it takes some effort to get ready for that. It's really 100-mile bike rides, and so the amount of training is really serious if you want to do reasonably well in an Ironman. And actually, if you want to finish it too. So, and I have other interests. So, I'm a skier, I'm a mountain biker. I started playing pickleball. So when we clear of the virus, I'm pretty certain I'll continue to do international distances locally here. I believe there's actually an Ironman in Wilmington. I'll probably
There
get
is.
involved in helping with it. I'm probably not going to race in it. And then continue to explore other activities that I want to do. So I recently started playing pickleball. I don't know if you've heard of that.
I certainly have. Yeah, that seems to be all the rage here all of a sudden.
It's so we added at Westlake Athletic Club. I ended up converting a tennis court into 3 pickleball courts, and we took our backboard to make it a 4th one. And what's really interesting there, and this goes back to the John that wants to help people lead healthy lifestyles. Pickleball is so much fun. It's easy. The entry in is simple. Go try that. I'm not saying you got to go do triathlons, but maybe it's pickleball that you join. I'm just trying to get people to realize that there's many, many different things that they can do to stay active. So pickleball is fun. Have you tried it?
I have not, no, but there's a couple of, pretty much all parks now have got pickleball, the lines and whatnot taped out there. But yeah, there's a dog park here that I go to every day with my dogs, and there's always people there playing pickleball, and they're having a blast. And like you said, the barrier to entry is pretty low. These folks aren't. Some of them take it very seriously, and some of them it seems like are just out there to have a good time. But they're doing something healthy. They're outdoors. They're doing something social. It looks like a lot of fun. So yeah.
I think the other thing, this is about general fitness, is I think it's really important to not look at exercise as a diet. Do not look at it as a diet. Look at it as a means of getting to a better quality of life. Whether that be playing with your grandchildren, whether that be walking up and down the steps without being completely winded. What'll likely happen is that it will lead to weight loss, but don't look at it as that. Look at it as that I want to play with my grandkids, or I want to mow my lawn, whatever it is. And I think that it will help get over that barrier. The second thing is, when you start an exercise program, absolutely 100% commit to, I'm going to do this hell or high water for 8 weeks, because it takes 8 weeks for this stuff to start kicking in. So unfortunately, having been in the industry for a long time, I've seen what happens. People get 4 or 5 weeks in. They haven't lost any weight. They're sore. They're more tired. And they're saying, what am I doing this for? They haven't seen or felt any results yet. That's week 6. Now the energy starts kicking in a little bit more. By week 8, now the weight loss is starting to kick in. So you've got to commit yourself to 8 weeks, because once you get to the point where you feel the results, you're probably much more likely to keep going.
To continue.
And that's where we
Absolutely.
lose them in the health club industry, Kevin. That's where we lose them. We lose too many people in those early stages that look at it as it is the most important thing in your life. Your health is the most important thing in your life, because if you lose it, not only are you going to suffer, your family, your coworkers, there's a whole lot of ripple effect when people get unhealthy. So let's move that up on the top of the list, the priority list. Our health should be our biggest priority.
Yeah, there's a concept of exercise as medicine, and making exercise a part of your self-care. And certainly as we age, right, it becomes more and more important that we stay active. And I love that you say don't make exercise a diet. I think a lot of people think of exercise as almost a punishment or something that they have to do. And going back to some of your earlier points, if you find something that you love and stick with that, you're much more likely to have a higher quality of life, right? You're going to get the benefits of being active and exercising. You're going to get the benefits of doing something that you love. And then to your point, 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks out, you're going to start noticing, hey, I've dropped a few pounds. I've got a little more lean muscle mass, and I feel strong and capable and confident in my everyday life to play with my grandkids, to go out and do things, to take that hike, etc. So that's very well said. I think that we need to reframe exercise. It is a medicine, and it is something that you have to continuously dose, but it doesn't have to be onerous or unpleasant. In fact, it shouldn't be, right? If you're choosing the right activities, it should be pleasant, it should be fun, and it should be something that helps you grow as a person,
right,
in addition to making you physically healthier.
Right. Yeah. No, for sure. For sure. As a country, we're not doing well with this obesity rate through the roof and diabetes through the roof. We really need to prioritize our health. And so hopefully the message that people will get from this is that I'm going to move it up on the priority list, and I'm going to start somewhere. It doesn't. I look back actually to when I decided to start doing triathlons again when we moved to California. I hadn't done them in a while because I ended up just being more of a cyclist back in Jersey. And I got in the pool, Kevin, and I made it up and back once. Two lengths of the pool, and I was exhausted. It's like, it was humbling, number one, because I'd come a long way, dropped a long way, but take that to a 2.5 mile, 2.4 mile swim. That's where it took me. It took me starting at almost nothing to get to where I got to, and I think that's really important as we talk to the people that are not active, that are really thinking about getting in. And just start slow and start to, and really importantly is change the intensity. If you end up being a runner, don't go out and run a half hour at the same pace every day. Run 15 minutes one day at a quicker pace and 30 minutes at a slower. Change the duration, change the intensity, shake it up so the body can't adjust to what's going on, and it'll be a more results-oriented way to get yourself into better shape.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of resources out there to get people started, particularly, and if you're looking for triathlon, running, biking, swimming advice, I'm sure there's, depending on the size of community you're in, there's probably some community resources there and clubs based around those things. Well, John, as we're wrapping up here, do you have a place where people can connect with you? Are you active on any social media?
So right now, I'm not working. So the only connection is via my email. So that would be johnmsutcliffe@hotmail.com. Be happy to talk to anyone. And eventually when one of the things that's sad is my industry has been devastated. You can just imagine all these clubs being closed. And so it's going to be very, very challenging to see what ends up happening with it. I don't know exactly where I'm going to be. I don't know. I'll go back into health club or equipment sales. But the one thing I do know is that I'll always be interested in trying to help people lead healthier lifestyles in whatever I do. And I'll do something I enjoy. I'm not going to just choose something to do it just to do it. That's not of interest to me. So we'll see. I don't know. I've looked at even taking a position at Dick's Sporting Goods because, hey, am I helping people live a healthy lifestyle if I help them with a set of sneakers or a pair of sneakers? So we'll see what happens. But yeah, John M. Sutcliffe at Hotmail.
And I'll make sure I drop that into the show notes. So if anybody wants to reach out to you directly, they can do that there. Yeah. Well, John, again, thank you so much for taking some time with us today. You're a great ambassador for healthy aging. I think your story is great. It's very inspirational, and certainly wish you the best of luck in all your future endeavors.
Okay. Let me wrap up with one thing. So one of the manufacturers in the fitness industry, their motto is "Let's move for a better world." Let's all move for a better world. Get active, get out there, find something that you enjoy. Thanks, Kevin. It was awesome
thank you.
to chat with you. We'll catch up with you soon.
Well, that's our show for today, folks. If you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends and please consider subscribing and giving us a 5-star review. All the show notes and much more are available at our website at silver-edge.com. That's silver-edge.com. So until next time, stay strong.